Hello friends, and welcome back to this course titled as British Poetry. Friends, we are discussing Unit 2, Alfred Tennyson's Ulysses, and we are in the second or the last lecture on this poem Ulysses. Today we are going to discuss two elements of this poem. One is blank verse and the other one is dramatic monologue, and how this poem on the basis of these two elements can be considered as one of the benchmarks of English literature. So, you are going to learn as a lecture outcome how to execute the poem as a blank verse and dramatic monologue. So, without wasting much time, let us now focus on the first term for today's class, that is blank verse. The blank verse of Tennyson's Ulysses is suited to the manner of a great king. Strand and Boland said that blank verse is a natural vehicle for rhythmic and sustained speech, where complex arguments and emotion could be sustained without being drowned out by the rhyme. Friends, this definition is very appropriate according to blank verse. Now, all of us know that Ulysses was a great king, and for a person of his stature, no other person should be allowed to interrupt into his speech. So, the blank verse is a form which gives Ulysses freedom to speak without the restriction of rhyme. He has that kind of dominance, that authority which he uses through his poem, through his speech. And as said by these two critics, Strand and Boland, they said about blank verse that through blank verse there is, a kind of sustainability which comes with the speech. The complex arguments, the emotions, or whatever the speaker is speaking, it can lead to a long lasting impact or a sustained impact into which cannot be achieved through rhyme in the poem. On the other hand, blank verse also has a great suspension of the sentence, an acceptance of duration, and an imitation or a description of thought. When these critics, Strand and Boland, they further analyzed the definition of blank verse, they understood that blank verse is a kind of, great suspension of the sentence. Suspension of the sentence, that the expectation which we have from the language, that is not, required in while using blank verse. There is an acceptance of duration. The things will go on. The imitation or the description of thought is very smoothly, presented through blank verse, which is why, friends, William Shakespeare has used a lot blank verse into his, plays, and maybe just because of this reason, Alfred Lord Tennyson has also written this poem Ulysses in the blank verse. This poem by Tennyson uses these modes to great advantage. Blank verse is iambic with 5 beats per line. This form has commonly been called the language of nobility. Friends, if I tell you about the structure of blank verse, as you already know, blank verse is a poem which is written in iambic, pentameter. In iambic pentameter, we have 10 syllables, or 5 feet in one line, in which the first syllable is unstressed, then stressed, then unstressed, then stressed, and in this way the last syllable in the line is stressed. So, total 10 syllables are there in a line. So, 5 beats per line means, beats means feet, 5 feet per line we have in blank verse. And this is known as the language of nobility. Nobility, why? Because till Elizabethan age, blank verse writing is one of the most famous, let's say, writing styles into literature. And this is also some, let's say, linguists say that the way English is spoken, the term is stress term rhythm. So English is spoken in a rhythm that is known as stress term rhythm. So nearest to that stress term rhythm is the blank verse. So if any poem is written in blank verse, then you can sing that poem very smoothly if you are a native English speaker. So this is also a language of nobility for the British people. Iamb comes closest to the natural pattern of human speech, and 5 beats let the speaker say something without being cut off. So there is a smoothness, a natural pattern which is visible in iambic pentameter. Ulysses, the mythological hero and speaker of the poem, is the king of Ithaca. It would only be natural for this high-bred men to speak in this language of kings. So, as let's say kings and queens or the people from the high class or the mythological heroes, they are supposed to speak in this, let's say, form only, which is why intentionally Tennyson uses, let's say, this dramatic monologue into the form of blank verse. The fact that blank verse does not force stops in speech is necessary in this poem so that it does not sound forced. Forced rhyme can overshadow the message. Friends, another, let's say, purpose of introducing blank verse in this poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson is that he did not want to, let's say, give a forceful message through the mouth of Ulysses. Ulysses is motivating his fellow men to be with him, to start a new journey and to explore a new world. And on the other hand, Ulysses is also motivating his son to be the new king and his wife in a very different manner. Nowhere in the poem we see that Ulysses is trying to, let's say, impose his decision of starting another voyage on his wife, his son and his, let's say, citizens. So, let's say there is no force rhyme which is used in the poem. Many of the sentences in Ulysses do not stop at the end, but rather continue to the natural ending of the sentence. Friends, we had also seen in this poem Ulysses that there is a let's say, continuity in the sentences. By the end of one sentence, the beginning of another sentence exists. So the sentences are complete and they create a flow into, let's say, another line to create a natural ending in the poem. And here is one quote from the poem. Ulysses, I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees. All times I have enjoyed greatly. This is, friends, the speech of Ulysses. As you can see that when I say I will drink, the sentence is incomplete. And then it completes in the second line, life to the lees. If you go to the end of the next line, I have enjoyed what? To what extent? Again the sentence is incomplete. And then it completes with the word greatly. So in this way, Tennyson is, let's say, keeping the lines incomplete, and to complete the line we have to move to the next line. As you can see in this line, Ulysses is motivating himself for another voyage. He is trying to say that he cannot rest from travel. Let's say he cannot stop traveling in this life till his death. He wants to drink the life to its, let's say, to its extent. And all the times in the past he had enjoyed greatly and he wished to still enjoy his life. Tennyson could easily have forced these lines into a rhyming pattern or easily made the sentences stop at the end of a line. He doesn't, because people don't talk like that. Friends, when we, let's say, talk about Tennyson's perspective in these lines, we see that he could have easily forced these lines into a rhyming pattern. He is an excellent poet, and he could have easily made the sentences stop at the end of the line, just like heroic couplets. But he did not do that because people don't talk in that manner. So, he wanted to create a continuity and naturalness in the poem, which is why he used this, let's say, skill of enjambment. Basically, this term in literature is known as enjambment, of incomplete meaning at the end of one line and then it completes in the second line. This is known as enjambment, E-N-J-A-B-M-E-N-T. A sentence or thought finishes when it does, sometimes less than a required number of beats and sometimes less. In a natural speech also, friends, we have seen that a sentence or a thought finishes when it is supposed to finish. There is nothing like mechanical in the speech. Sometimes less than the required number of beats and sometimes, let's say, more than the required number of beats. But as a poet writing a blank verse, the poet has to maintain that 10-syllable pattern in one line. This is extremely important for a poem that wants the reader to break out of the limited human realm and explore the vast wide world. So, when we look at this poem and the purpose with which this poem is written, we understand that Ulysses wants the readers to break out the limited human realm. The limitations of human beings need to be broken by, let's say, this person Ulysses, and the vast wide world need to be explored by him. So, Tennyson, through the speech of Ulysses, is trying to make us feel the, let's say, the large life of Ulysses. Why would Ulysses stop at the end of a line when he himself knows no boundaries? Take for example this line from the poem, strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find and not to yield. Now this line, one of the most famous one from the poem, suggests that Ulysses do not understand any boundaries. He wished to live life according to his priorities, and thus he do not want to end his speech at the end of a line, but he wished to continue it to the next line. This poem is all about not being fenced in, yet the natural human, sometimes royal, I am is there. This clearly makes blank verse the most suitable choice for the poem of this nature. Friends, we see in this poem that Ulysses do not like fences to let's say, to stop him to go anywhere. Yet he is a natural human being. So which is why he chooses to speak in iambic pentameter. It clearly makes the blank verse suitable for him, for a person like him to speak in that situation. Let us now move to the next term into the process, into this lecture, and that is dramatic monologue. Now friends, this poem is a dramatic monologue, like one of the dramatic monologues we discussed earlier, and you know the definition of dramatic monologue. We have talked about it in the earlier poem written by Robert Browning, right? We have a dramatic monologue is a kind of, let's say, dialogue where one person is kept on speaking and there is no person who is interrupting. So, let us look at the term dramatic monologue in context of this poem. Arthur Hallum, Tennyson's friend, had just died at sea. Tennyson must continue in his duty anyway. He also needed to find comfort in Hallum's death. He died as an active man engaged in meaningful activity. Friends, there was a friend of Tennyson, Arthur Hallum, who lived a kind of life like Ulysses, most of the time in sea, struggling with the storms of the sea. And then after some time he passed away. Tennyson was demotivated and he wanted to give a tribute to his friend Arthur Hallum, which is why he wrote this poem. The genre of the poem is dramatic monologue. It is an ancient genre that had recently been popularized again by Robert Browning. We had seen it in the previous poem, that in this age, the, let's say, 19th century, the Victorian age, Robert Browning made this dramatic monologue kind of, let's say, writing popular. Let us now try to understand what are the characteristics of dramatic monologue. First characteristic is somebody is speaking. So, the second characteristic, the whole poem is the character's speech. So, we understand that someone is speaking continuously. The entire poem is the character speech of that person. Character speech means we will understand the character portrait of that character with the speech of that person. So, thoughts and ideas talk about the personality of a person, and which is why we now know about the personality of Ulysses through his speech. Third characteristic, the character is in dramatic setting. There is particular audience, time and place. So, friends, there is a kind of dramatic setting. We see here also, Ulysses wished to leave his house. That is the last moment he had stayed here. And there is a dilemma going on in his mind, a kind of drama is going on in his mind. So, this is a kind of dramatic setting. The particular audience, time and place is required in different parts of the poem. And we had seen it. In the first part, Ulysses is talking about his wife and son. The second part, he is talking about his, let's say, citizens of his city. And in the third part of the poem, he is talking to his fellow mariners, motivating them to begin the new journey. The next characteristic is the reader must determine from hints in the poem the identity of the speaker. We have, friends, the readers also in the poem, but they are passive. And what is their role? They need to identify, let's say, identity of the speaker. Second, the identity of the audience and the relationship between them. Now we understand that Ulysses had a very close relationship with his family and his fellow mariners and, let's say, citizens of his city. So, this relationship is also explored through dramatic monologue. The third thing which we know through audience is the setting and time of the poem. In which time this poem is written, because that is relevant to understand the context. And the fourth thing is the speaker's purpose. What is the purpose with which a speaker is, let's say, writing this poem? The poem is written as a dramatic monologue. The entire poem is spoken by a single character whose identity is revealed by his own words. So, in this poem, we understand the character portrait of the person from the statements of that person. The lines are in blank verse or unrhymed iambic pentameter, which serves to impart a fluid and natural quality of Ulysses' speech. So, there is a naturality which we find in this poem. Many of the lines are engemmed, which means that the thought does not end with the line break. The sentences often end in the middle rather than the end of the line. So, I already told you that there is an engagement technique used in the poem. There is not a, let's say, stopping of line at the end of every sentence, but sometimes the line break even in the middle of the sentence, and then a new line begins with a semicolon added before it. The use of enjambment is appropriate in a poem about pushing forward beyond the utmost bound of human thought. So, in this, friends, the technique of poetry writing, we see that there is a pushing forward. The poet is, let's say, throwing poem forward, the ideas forward beyond the utmost bound of human thought. It means where we have stopped thinking, the poet wished to continue the idea. We think that the ideas are now complete, but the poet has now something to say again. The use, let's say, finally, the poem is divided into 4 paragraphs like sections, each of which comprises a distinct thematic unit of the poem. So, we have 4 paragraphs in the poem, can be compared as 4 sections with a different, let's say, thematic units. As in all dramatic monologues, here the character of the speaker emerges almost unintentionally from his own words. Ulysses' incompetence as a ruler is evident by the preference of the potential quests rather than his present responsibilities. Friends, we see that Ulysses is a wandering soul. He is not a good king, but he is a good explorer. He wishes to explore life again. He is happy in the sea, searching new places. He do not want to live comfortably like king in a castle, and let's say he want to let's say explore new things, want to go away somewhere with his fellow men. He devotes a full 26 lines of his own egotistical proclaimed of his zeal for the wandering life, and another 26 lines to the exhortation of his mariners to roam the seas with him. Friends, the lines, we can say, are divided into 2 parts. First 26 lines where Ulysses is addressing his family, his let's say citizens, etc. In the next 26 lines, he is motivating his fellow mariners to convince them that they should, let's say, do a new beginning now. However, he offers only 11 lines of lukewarm praise to his son concerning the governance of the kingdom of absence, and mere 2 words about his aged wife Penelope. So, Ulysses gives very less weightage to his wife Penelope, and let's say he do not want to talk about them, rather he is more concerned about his fellow men. Thus, the speaker's own words betray his abdication of responsibility and his specificity of purpose. So, we came to a conclusion that the speaker has his own preferences, and in his preferences the families do not fall, but his fellow men and his preference towards voyage is more important for him rather than his family and his, let's say, luxurious life which he is living right now. For him, it is the responsibility of an explorer to go into the sea again, for him not to stop and stay in a comfortable, let's say, house. So, I hope that with this you have now got a holistic picture of the poem Ulysses, and as soon as you will make the first reading of the poem, you will understand what poet has to say through this poem and through this old concept of Ulysses. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.